Hello everyone, I'm Broken Mojo, just Mojo for short, and this is MOJODraws, episode 5 for the month of December 2020. End of the year now. End of the year everyone's been bitching about, complaining about. Thank God it's finally dead, you know. This video is going to serve as a quick and dirty pass of a video I might never make. Video essays aren't really something I've ever considered doing, but I've been developing some ideas regarding the Fallout series that I've been wanting to express in some way. As such, I'm going to ramble about the series while we watch me draw this here DeathClaw. Fairly iconic creature from the franchise. Thought it sort of fit. Maybe could have done a super mutants or like a rad scorpion or something. I don't know. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to do some art talk before we get into anything else. I know some people might like that. But I did about an hour of thumbnailing before I even chose the specific pose or started recording. I have never really done creatures or animal drawings, really not a lot. I've mostly stuck with character illustrations, like humans, anthros, that sort of stuff. So my actual knowledge of animal anatomy is not the best, and that can go all the way down to just being familiar with drawing them. I don't have a lot of experience. I'm not too sharp on that. So I had to heavily rely on reference material to do this. If you see the drawing pause a bit, that's because I'm tapping away to look at like references and things. I found a series of pictures of some sort of collector's item, a little statue of a DeathClaw from multiple angles, and that helped out a lot. And it was Fallout 4 was the version I based this off on, the Fallout 4 version of DeathClaw. And here you can see me, I've doubled up on this little thumbnail pose I have. And so the idea here was to use this red line layer to sort of carve at the silhouette of the whole thing to get happy with how that looked. I've been trying to consider that side, the graphic side of that, among other things, because I think I sort of neglect them. And I'm tired of just being like, oh, it has to be this way, you know, and you just get super exact with it. I'm like, you know, I want to get more shapy and graphical with it. So this second version, which never got touched, that was supposed to be like an attempted ideation that after like 5 or 10 minutes of working on this first one here, I'd switch to the second and sort of try again, go in a different direction just to see what happens, see if I can make something better to play off it or whatever. That never happened. I got too focused and zeroed in without even attempting anything. It's a huge problem for me, actually. I get caught in ideas and I can't let them go. Can't back up, re-examine, ideate. You know, it's a bad artist habit, and you always got to be firm and catch yourself when that happens. Otherwise, it's just gonna be harder next time to try to do it. You're establishing a bad habit. That applies to life in general, actually. You do something hard now, so it's easier later. And at the very least, I explored multiple pose ideas, so that's like a point or two on my good artist board. But anyway, enough with that shit. Fallout. The Fallout series. It's one of those cases where there's like multiple distinct generations of fans. I know of 2, maybe 3. And that's like, they're the old Fallout games. That's Fallout 1, 2, Tactics, Brotherhood of Steel, maybe another one, or maybe some like other things or whatever. You know, I'm not sure. Those are the isometric turn-based games, basically. Old, ancient 2D graphics. There's pixels, for fuck's sakes. Disgusting. And I'm not really familiar with when those really came out. Probably the 90s or whatever, but that's a distinct generation. There's a distinct generation of fans who played those. There's a clear line we can draw between those games and the new games, like Fallout 3, New Vegas, 4, and finally Fallout 76, which was the impetus of this whole discussion. I've put about 100 hours into it now. You know, don't crucify me or anything. But I'm going to give my opinion of it here towards the end of this video. You can call it the definitive review, so we can finally decide whether or not we want to buy it. These new games, these Bethesda games, with New Vegas sort of being off to the side, being developed by Obsidian, with all the Bethesda tool sets they built for Fallout 3, and Obsidian being sort of composed of the old people who worked on Fallout in the first place. These new games, they are first-person shooters, basically the layman. To be generous, I could say like they're a first-person RPG, a first-person adventure game, but I think it's important to distinguish the difference in genres between these two sets of games. Tactical isometric RPGs versus FPS RPGs. I've only played a little bit of the old games, Fallout 1. So I can't really comment on how like the entire game feels to play. I sort of don't like that style of game. It's sort of hard for me to like become immersed and interested in it. So I've never really touched them, unfortunately. I own them all because Steam does their stupid Steam sales. But I guess experience-wise with the Fallout franchise, I've played Fallout 3, all the DLCs, New Vegas, all the DLCs, and Fallout 4. None of the DLCs because, I mean, again, I own the DLCs there. I just don't play them. And now 76 as well. And a lot of that was on console. I have played New Vegas on PC with various mods and things. And I played Fallout 4 on PC with various mods. And obviously I played 76 on PC. Mods really changed these games. They really sort of fixed what Bethesda can't do. But after all my time with the series, which actually isn't a huge amount compared to some people, it's incredibly hard for me to actually beat a Bethesda games because I just lose interest. I sort of like just to dick around the world for a week or two. But I play these games sort of as RPGs, role-playing games. I have a role, a character, not necessarily a build. There's a difference in terminology there. And I interact with the world in a way I think the character would sort of interact with it. I think Bethesda is actually good at building these worlds. There's lore, history. There's a genuine sense of exploration that I'm sad I can't go and experience for the first time. That's what I like. And I like the fact that it's in first person. That's sort of where I get my immersion from. I think it's the purest way I could say that. It's a world I like to be in. And I know a lot of the games suck. And like we can all meme on their terrible fucking engine and how awkward the game sort of looks and controls and how buggy and game breaking and unstable the whole mess is. It doesn't look good at a glance. But the games have people who pour countless hours into them. They're really fucking popular. I think everyone understands that. So it's like, why? And I would propose that there's this rewarding gameplay loop in a Bethesda game that is not a short one. Though they sort of want a short one in 76 now because that's how sort of video games have gone. But they want this long gameplay loop that you can't get multiple times in a session. It's not like, a couple matches in Call of Duty, a raid in an MMO, or a match or two in League or something. It's a collective experience that you build over multiple play sessions. Like your history as a character, your improvement in your abilities, and how you've interacted and changed this world from start to finish. Character experience and world experience. Those are the two big phrases I've come up with in my thinking. There's no hopping on for a quick session of Fallout. You open your menu and you're sorting through all your loot to try to manage your weight limit, managing all these items. You're thinking about like where you want your build to eventually go, I guess. Or your character, I guess. Your build, whatever. And you're like, you have dozens of quests that you've picked up and you need to do. And you're like, okay, what do I want to do? You decide on something. And then me personally, I'm like, okay, now I have to go to that quest marker over on the map. So I have to walk over there. And there's all sorts of distractions, like enemies you have to fight, locations you need to explore. Maybe you need to offload some loot at some point. And I know a lot of people just fast travel everywhere, which is probably the secret to beating a Bethesda game is to use fast travel more. But I like the exploration and survival aspects too much. I think those are really fun and engaging. And a cynical part of me, I guess, since with the size of these games and the length and the time you can invest, a cynical part would be like, okay, well, they can just be sort of viewed as economy-sized games. More bang for your buck. And it's not like potato chip games where those are just sort of short 30-minute experience that you just do 7 to 8 times in a session. Like another Warframe mission, Destiny match, whatever. Just one more game, just one more little loop or whatever. Fallout's like an economy-sized super sip, a giant-ass fucking burger, some huge meal. And you just one long massive session of gameplay. And it's not like it's good or anything. It's just like a bunch of sort of shitty middle-of-the-road food. But, let's not be too negative on it. People spend hundreds of hours in these games. It's obvious they like them. As to why people like these Fallout games, and I guess the Elder Scroll games as well, is that, well, everyone's got their own reasons, but I would say it's this character experience and world experience things. It's not really the gameplay systems themselves. Do you play these games for their combat or their story? It's not, probably not. It's not really one thing. It's like a combination of all of them, and sort of like, it's greater than the sum of its parts. If you look at like a little slice of a Fallout game, you're like, that looks sort of shitty. But then later you're like, well, after putting a dozen hours into it, I sort of understand. It's not about, it's not about tuning a build. Fallout 3 was bare bones as hell in the way you could craft your character. There's definitely some stuff you can do there. And it's in each game they've made, mostly 4 and 76, it's obvious that they're sort of pushing towards a build mentality, shorter gameplay loops and such. And I don't think that's actually antithetical to the character experience and world experience stuff. That I think that's what they're really drawing well. New Vegas did it very well, in my opinion. But I mean, it's a different mindset that's being forced more in these recent games. Your like build decisions are mattering more just to be able to engage successfully with sort of how the game works. This is mainly in the combat systems. There was a change. Fallout 3 brought the series into first person, and a lot of the old systems had to be adapted to work in first person and in real time. Skills, the special systems, derived statistics, primaries, whatever. A lot could just sort of carry over, like how well you could treat a wound or something, like with the metal skin skill, and it just work. Active skills, like combat skills mainly, were the things that changed a lot. Old Fallout was like rooted in tabletop, more pen and paper RPG stuff. It's turn-based, and the amount you could do in a turn would be determined by your AP. And that game worked off. It had a layer of abstraction in combat that let special skill perk systems work better. In like a bigger number meant better results. It was more obvious to see that way. Ordering your character to shoot an enemy, a rad scorpion, which makes your character shoot the rad scorpion. A damage value based on your skill numbers would be presented to the rad scorpion's defenses, or armor class, damage threshold, then damage resistance, or something like that. I don't know how the formula actually works. And then like there'd be a random chance to see if your weapon got a crit. And that's all the same in Fallout 3, except in Fallout 1, you had a chance to miss because you didn't control how the gun was perfectly aimed. Your gun skill did, or whatever relevant skills or perks. There was a dice roll. In Fallout 3, you actively control that weapon. You're holding in your hand. You have to physically move and shoot. Sure, there's some skill number telling you how much sway you have, your recoil amount, but it's not significant. I think aiming with a scoped weapon was more heavily affected. Like with low gun skills, you couldn't aim very well. Like the gun would be going all over the place. But I mean, you as the player, you could get better at controlling that sway or whatever of that swinging gun, regardless of your skill numbers. You could do the low level guns 5 build and be a marksman and snipe everything as long as you got good with that swinging ass scope. And I think this highlights an important distinction, is that this layer of abstraction, the little presentation of old Fallout games made the skill numbers mean more because it was closer to that pen and paper stuff. And I think the issue at hand that Bethesda has been solely trying to work out is how do they make an RPG that more fits the genre of first-person shooter, and I guess their engine limitations. It's the struggle Bethesda has, I think. They know they're making an FPS RPG, so they know there's a certain way that genre plays, and players have much more agency over their movements, aiming, active controls. They know there's certain things that they just can't gamify that well. It'd feel bad. They can't make it so like low gun skills would make your character inaccurate as hell, like literally unable to play. And they would like drop a magazine on reload. They couldn't take the recoil properly. They couldn't maintain the weapons or whatever. That would just be sort of unplayable for people expecting an FPS. It'd be interesting. You could have it so that there's a dice roll when you literally point your gun and shoot. So even if the bullet hits, you miss. Morrowind did that, but I stopped playing Morrowind after a while. It's a massive turnoff to a lot of people who aren't really okay with that idea. It's a niche idea, but I mean, most people aren't going to be okay with that. And it sort of requires this layer of abstraction to make sort of these numbers work with these combat systems. But I think Bethesda is sort of just falling back on more number equal bigger damage. More number means you aim better, sort of. It's not really that much. And then, for whatever magic reason, more number means you magically do more damage. In the old games, I mean, with that layer of abstraction, more number meant that your character could sort of aim the shot better for more penetration. More rounds from a burst fire would hit the target for more damage. I'm not sure how it all works, visually presented, which is sort of the issue. It's still sort of suspect, but it's sort of allowed because it's a turn-based thing. Something they did to try to sort of keep that around was to use the VAT system, which I think was how it was presented in the old games, how you were aiming and shooting or whatever. I'm not sure, so correct me if I'm wrong on this. But the VAT system was an attempt to keep this turn-based combat, the tactical combat. Shoot the arms to cause the enemy to be more inaccurate. Shoot the legs to reduce mobility, stop them from moving, or shoot the head to literally just fucking kill them. With the cost of having massively reduced accuracy because it's a bit of a smaller target. And you can miss in VATS when you could absolutely miss in VATS when you can hit it with manual aiming, which is sort of, that's a discrepancy there that makes people, not want to play it. But I mean, if you're not really sniping things, there is an advantage to be able to freeze time and blow away a group of enemies that got too close. I think VATS also gave you an enormous amount of damage resistance when you used it. Like you could ignore like explosions and all sorts of gunfire, which is an interesting benefit, even though it doesn't make sense. But VATS also caused the game to crash a lot, lock up, bug out. I've noticed that a lot, and I'm certain other people have as well. And I think people mainly just got turned off to VATS after a while. Like you could like have a cool slow-mo kill or something, but I mean, was it worth having your game lock up? Fallout 4 actually did something interesting, where it introduced the VATS critical hits system. Like as you hit stuff in VATS, you built this little meter or whatever, and when it filled, you could press spacebar or something to trigger a critical hit. You do huge damage on demand, but you could also bank that. You could just have that bar filled and just like, okay, I want to use it now. And you could sort of advance that sort of idea with different perks, so you could have multiple critical hits banked. You can queue up like I think 4 and sort of the maximum of that. And you could also do it so like every time you hit something in VATS, it built up more of the critical bar faster. So you could turn into a VATS build where you just dished out critical hits willy-nilly, which I'm like, okay, that's cool. It's an interesting system and something I didn't really even mess around with until I played Fallout 4 for over 150 hours. And I was like, oh, there's this system here I didn't know about. It's very interesting, In 76, they can't freeze time on a multiplayer game, obviously, so it's just like auto aim in real time. You see the little percentage number changing as you sort of stop moving, get closer, obvious things. Which it's not that bad for me, at least, because I don't really care about combat in 76 that much. It's just, it gets in the way a lot. I kill things so they stop attacking me so I can get back to looting and exploring and stuff like that. So Bethesda's had this problem. They need a certain level of fidelity in an FPS to sort of make people not throw up. So they're like, okay, how do we RPGify this FPS game in terms of character ability? And I think Bethesda has, again, they've opted to focus on player growth being derived from like level gated damage boosts and stuff like that. It's sort of dumbed down. And there's certain things that are like them shifting to the mindset of things like, well, we can gamify this in FPS. This makes more sense. But in total, I think it's less about a reduction of failure, like missing a shot, and it's more like a maximization of like choice, your damage. Since you're always going to hit because you're aiming, you're not stupid. You've played an FPS before. You control the damn gun. And it's more like, oh, well, you just don't have the number versus this enemy. You need more number. Invest in this number to, compete in this arms race where you're always just keeping up with everything. And this is the problem I've had in Fallout 4 and 76. It's this idea that you need a build. You need some sort of intelligence way to build yourself so you can interact with the world, which can, fuck them. Fuck yourself. And if we look at Fallout 4, then we see they got rid of the skill system because of this. And they shifted a bunch of things around. Everything that sort of checked the skills, like gun damage, lockpicking success, those were repackaged into perks with specific special requirements. Weapon skills, small guns, big guns, energy weapons. They shifted to be more like a physical weapon class, like pistols, shotguns, rifles, automatic versus semi-automatic. And there's no real distinction between energy and ballistic firearms anymore in terms of damage. There's just sort of flavorful things they've thrown on in the form of perks usually. So this is the acknowledgement on Bethesda's part that a numeric skill change relating to the damage ability of guns doesn't work too well with the FPS interface that players are using, in my opinion, of their opinion. The player character has some standard competence with every weapon just for the sake of being a competent FPS. We can't have the player's gunplay being so bad people don't want to play. So they got rid of the skill system. They reworked the perks to be less about getting flavorful rewards or potent rewards that require specialization, and which requires a sacrifice in your character elsewhere to meet their requirements. We changed the perks to be, oh, you want to be a pistol guy? Take this perk, Gunslinger, and the subsequent perks after it to gain more damage and unique rewards like greater range, crippling chance, or whatever. You only need 1 agility for all the ranks of the Gunslinger perk, but you're going to need higher levels to get higher ranks. You're going to to get rank 3 of that, you're going to need to be level 30 or something. So there's a case where you could have all 4 or 5 ranks of Gunslinger with just 1 agility, provided you're high enough level. All the weapon perk trees are like that. They require just some very low amount of special points, besides heavy guns, which requires 5, I believe. That's sort of open, like Fallout 3 was. Oh, you can use everything, but it feels, it's blunt. Why you need to sort of pick a weapon to sort of play around in, and it's well, there's not really a good reward for it, It's not any sacrifice there, other than just oh, well, using that's going to be blah, Yeah. Now, there's some things I do like about the perk system in Fallout 4, character system, or whatever. This just changes they've done. I think the critical hit system in VATS, I think that's interesting. I like other things high endurance means you can sprint and run forever. I like that they added sprinting. And then higher perks that regenerate you from radiation, actually heal in sunlight. That's interesting to build down there. And how they changed radiation into being this ever increasing debuff to your max health. That made it actually something you had to deal with. I think most people ignored the special debuffs in the other games because who cares, And then there's lots of other things like grenade hotkey, gun bashing, Fallout 4 definitely plays as a better FPS than 3. And I think that's how most people play it. But they've definitely had to gut out a lot of things. And I guess to summarize all this rambling, Fallout 4 and to extent 76 are improvements to 3 and 4 and 3 and New Vegas in terms of being an FPS. And Bethesda's making some good choices in that regard. Fallout 3 was a more open game than 4 in the sense that it matters less what you did build-wise. If you had a missile launcher, everything would die. But Fallout 4, it's more gamey. Just because you have a high-power weapon doesn't mean it does shit if you haven't invested in it. And they're good. They're getting better at making content. It's fun to pick up and play without really having to care what you're doing. And in New Vegas and all this, it's on the opposite end of that spectrum. New Vegas is all about your entire playthrough. The world's a lot more static, so you can sort of plan out what you need to do in your playthrough, hit what you want, collect the items you need, do the quests that sort of mean what you want your character to mean. and it's not really playable in the short term. You know, like you can't just hop on and walk somewhere and just, okay, I'm just going to go shoot those things. The map's really barren. You sort of need an idea of what you need to do. And then those, you know, certain locations you're going to do are going to be really fun. You know, and then modding, you can fix a lot of problems in there, you know, add radiant content, which what I think it needs. You know, at that point, I think New Vegas becomes the best. It's still really clunky, but it's a lovable type of clunky, I'd argue. And all of this, I haven't touched on any of the story aspects in any of the games, because that's like an entirely different video. And I think people have their own sort of hyperbolic opinions on that. But I mean, to actually talk about Fallout 76, well, it was gifted to me when it was on sale for $13. So in exchange, I bought the Fallout First subscription so I could host my own private world, and then the person who bought it for me could sort of enjoy that as well. So sort of a trade-off there. And then I've had some other friends pick it up and play with me, and on and off put about 100 hours into it. The funner with friends thing that people say is sort of a stupid argument for it, because it's like, yeah, everything is funner with friends. So it's a bit of an empty statement. You know, it is the reason I put 100 hours into it. You know, just sitting in voice chats and hanging out with my friends there. And I think if you've had fun with Fallout 4 systems and you sort of enjoy other potato chip games that you can play with other people, it's fine. You know, pick it up on sale or something. I feel like all of 76 was like this high level concept made by like some high level designers or whatever, and it was pitched as like, oh, we have a dozen players and they're each fulfilling the niches that we've left out by not including NPCs. Like, oh, some players are going to be like raider types, other people are trying to be merchants, but like no one's going to play that game. People need like some sort of rail system in potato chip games to sort of get them going in a direction. No one's just going to sit around for hours role playing. You know, some people will, but not a massive amount of people. Not enough for a AAA studio to become interested anyway. And then this sort of high concept idea got beaten down. So it was like, okay, it's a daily game, potato chip game, where players just, they do events and shit, rage, you know. I think it needed to be outsourced to like a different studio with a different engine. And, you know, launch fiasco aside, I think that was all just a coincidence of Bethesda having bad management. You know, I don't think it really affects how the game plays. It definitely didn't look good, them fucking up and everything, but I think that needs to be held all separately. Right now, I feel like it's in Fallout 76 is in like a No Man's Sky situation where they've worked on it for like 2 or 3 years now, and they've sort of got it into a playable state, just beating it in there, and I'm just going to sort of talk about my experiences with it. Right now, I guess the most surprising thing is that I'm actually enjoying the like original main quest line. The one that featured no NPCs besides robots and notes and shit like that. The sort of lore behind why Appalachia, which is the region you're in, why it's got no NPCs and why it's full of robots is actually explained in a way that makes sense. Like the Scorched Plague, which was something that I'm not quite sure, because I haven't been really paying attention to many quests. But the Scorched Plague, it happened, and it pretty much wiped most people out, like NPCs and other animals, though animals could sort of still survive. But apparently NPCs, people who could talk and give quests, they can't stand it. They mostly got wiped out. And the Scorched Place is caused by things called like Scorched Beasts, which are just Skyrim dragons, basically. And it turns to anything that becomes scorched into sort of like a hive mind that can control them. And I mean, you know, that wiped out a lot of the surviving population. All the different fractions that have arose right after the Great War. 76 takes place like 25 years after the war. So there were still a lot of just original pre-war survivors who managed to group up, like the group called the Responders, which are just composed of police officers, firemen, medics, and stuff like that. The old Appalachia government, other things like that. And you go around and you sort of hit all these main faction groups with one sort of little small quest line leading to, oh, you need to go for that. Then figure out what happened to like the Free States group. And that sort of, you bounce around until you sort of figure out how they beat back the Scorched Plague without actually solving it. They just sort of they nuked them basically, and did they nuke them? I'm not sure. I should have paid attention more, but they sort of caused the Scorched Plague to die down a little bit. Then the Vault Dwellers from 76 came out. They follow all these little like notes and quest lines and stuff, and they're like, okay, we just need to nuke this area, and that will sort of stop the Scorch from being such a big threat. They're still going to be in the game because they were coded to be in there, but nuking them will prevent it from being such a disaster that no one can live here. And then I think canonically they do that, and then like NPCs come back in, and that's where you get Wastelanders and the Steel Dawn updates. But like new players can still do the original main quest, which makes it weird because it's implied throughout the original main quest that no one's left, and it's really clunky, but it's better than I thought it'd be. Definitely surprising there. System-wise, there's very much a build mentality about the game. Everything's leveled to you, but enemy health pools and resistances are so large that I think most people will go through a phase from like level 20 to 45 where everything is just a massive bullet sponge and so frustrating to fight. And then eventually, once you sort of finish leveling up, getting special points and stuff, you'll figure out a way to get reasonable damage values out of your weapons. Teaming up helps a lot though. And in the main quest, I found it's not really a huge issue, but there's events and certain things that you'll need other people for. You could probably do it solo, but you're going to need a lot of ammo, a backup gun, because your gun will literally just break in combat from how much you're having to use it. You can also circumvent a lot of that by just using power armor and a heavy weapon, which why those I think are sort of locked at later levels just to spawn. Combat's always not been a thing people have played Fallout for, so it's always been not a good thing. I guess in direct praise of the game, something I always suspected I would like about the game, I'd say the environment and world are pretty damn good. The regions are like large and very distinct from each other visually, sort of how they play. And this is like the most trees I've ever seen in a Fallout game. I don't know how I feel about that. The map's really huge because necessity. It's an MMO light. They just need to make it bigger. And there's so many tons of like interesting locations and lore and history and world building. There's a lot to explore. When I was originally watching the original trailers of the game where there's screaming country roads and stuff like that, I remember thinking like this world's wasted on 76 because it's going to be a shit show for a long time. And I've sort of confirmed that. Like, I love the world, and I wish it was just a single-player game. I think that'd be really good. The perk system's interesting. Swapping out perks and stuff. And here we have the final image. This thing I've been drawing back in the background that no one cares about. The perk system's interesting. It doesn't lock you out of anything. And then from level 50 onwards, you can just redistribute your special points to sort of fix whatever's wrong with your build, but you never stop getting perk cards. You never stop leveling up. So theoretically, you can get all the perk cards and just sort of do whatever you want to do. That's pretty like co-op friendly. I like it. I think it's interesting. But again, I feel like it's sort of like, is 76 the best place for a game like a system like that? I don't know. Maybe I think it could have been better used somewhere else. All in all, 76, it's not like a middle of the road game where everything's sort of average but sort of done with a certain amount of competence. I really enjoy the world environment. The combat's really bad. And just from the numbers in it and just numbers or whatever. I think the character systems, them being reworked into a multiplayer environment, it works. But it's left it in a weird environment that's, I think, really clunky. I think Bethesda's made something that's playable and interesting and sort of fun in the sense that, like, with the way Warframe or Destiny's fun. Those games are probably a lot more polished than this. It's very cobbled together. And I don't think it's really what fans of the series want. But, I mean, if you want to have fun in a co-op environment that, it's like Fallout 4, then, pick it up on sale. $20, $25. The Fallout first stuff is The benefits are so good that I'm sort of angry you have to pay for them. Like having a stash box just for your crafting materials that isn't capped. I don't know how I'd play without that. I don't know how I'd play without my survival tent I can just throw down to summon those stash boxes and make a fast travel point that's free. You know, I don't really like these really good things being locked behind a paywall, but that's sort of the price of having a persistent multiplayer service. There's only so much room that they can have to store all your data about your character and about what items you have. None of that stuff can be stored client side because people just hack into it and cheat. You know, you can't have cheating in a multiplayer game. The actual question is, who the hell wanted this? Who the hell wanted an MMO-like Fallout game? Maybe some people would have liked an Elder Scrolls Online thing, you know, something built in engine with a methodology to actually support the genre. But beating the creation engine or whatever they use in this multiplayer game they have, sort of stupid. Like, I'm sure that they can do the right stuff with their tool sets, but there's just like some core stuff that's just they're not going to be able to do. And holy crap, my cat's going crazy. I feel like there was definitely like some sort of push from higher ups, probably for a long time, to sort of do something multiplayer related in the Fallout IP because they know they can make a lot of money like that. And I'm certain something could be done that's a lot of people would enjoy, but it's too messy. You can have fun in 76. You can explore and discover this whole new world with some questionable canon content. A lot of the problems are just structural because it was sort of a dumb, clunky idea and sort of a beloved, clunky series. I'm definitely going to play more, especially if I forget to cancel my Fallout First subscription. If you despise the game and you think Bethesda's a sellout company that doesn't deserve your patronage for all the stuff they've done, I mean, I can't blame you. You know, there's a way to do it, but I don't think Bethesda was going to be able to do it here. But I'm out of time here, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to me ramble about this game you probably already have a very definite opinion on. I wanted to work through some ideas, and maybe down the line I'll make a 3-hour video documentary about my exact opinions about why if Bethesda has changed these things and talk about all these minute details that fascinate me. But, until then, thanks for watching, everyone. Check out the Patreon if you want to support more content like this. And I appreciate anyone who helps me there. See you later, guys. Bye.